All right, so we are the QC chicks.
Quality control checks.
Quality control. Thank you, Jack. And this week, we're going to be talking about Scream. Because at time of recording, it's the beginning of October, so spooky month. And we also just went to a local screening of the first movie, local screaming.
Yeah.
So it's at least the first one is fresh in our minds. We will not be talking about the third movie in this episode. That is going in another episode because the problems with that one more aligned with a general topic we were already going to discuss. There will be one singular aspect of that movie that we are talking about in this episode. But otherwise, we will be discussing mistakes through 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6. And that is individual to the films and across the franchise as a whole.
Yeah, we can talk a little bit about 3 just because at the end we are going to say what we rank each film.
Yes.
And we have very different opinions.
We do, apparently.
Well, this episode is really going to be a Scream, baby.
Live her alone.
Live her alone.
Get it?
Literally, so many good quotes in that film. Like, I just absolutely love it. When we saw it this week, I was reminded of one of my favorites.
Oh, no.
I actually wrote it into our breakdown, but I'm going to bring it up right away just because I thought it was so good. And it kind of gets into what we're going to talk about. So the scene where... Speaking of, we're going to be talking about spoilers.
Yeah, sorry if you haven't seen these movies. Many of them came out in the 90s and early 2000s, and you're a little more forgiven for 5 and 6. So I guess if you haven't seen those, just tune out after we talk about the 4th one. Please don't. But yeah, moving forward, spoilers.
Yeah, you need to see all of the movies to get what we're going to be talking about. But anyway, back to the quotes. I just thought it was so funny because when we watched it, I was like, oh, that's such a good line. And it just dates the film in such a way. It's where the detective or the sheriff, he has Billy in his office for questioning. And he asks him,
"What are you doing with a cellular telephone, son?"
Everybody's got one, Sheriff.
"Why do you have a cellular phone, son?" And I literally was like, that can only be done in the 90s. Like,
it's so good.
You would never hear that today. And it's nothing suspicious today to have a cell phone on you. Mm-mm. But for that movie, it was super suspicious to them. And they're like, why do you have this giant brick of a phone? Why are you carrying it around? That's a little bit sus. But I just thought it was so funny because specifically like things like that, the younger generation is going to watch it and go, oh, that's a weird line. Everybody has a cell phone. Like, they don't get it. Mm-hmm. They don't get how much trouble you would have to go to carry around this giant brick and then use it in your plot to murder a bunch of people and carry this thing around with you.
Especially because it was supposed to be such a big plot point that then we're like, oh, we're checking the records of the cellular phone. And it's like, you're making it sound like nobody has them. So how realistically in a small town like Woodsboro, how long is it going to take you to go through all the cellular phone records and figure out if he did it or not?
It was such a like important part of the movie that like the later ones, like it's not really brought up as like an issue. Like, oh, you have a cell phone. That's weird.
So it was you.
Yeah. And I just thought it was, cool because it's such a good line. It's so funny, but it also like dates the film that like changes over if people who have watched any of the new Screams or like ended up liking it later, and then the new generation of people who love Scream, they just don't get how good that is.
Exactly.
And I had to bring it up because when you and I saw the screening last week, I was like, oh, that line, it's so good.
It is so good. And there were people at the screening who'd never seen the movie before. So it was fun, especially to sort of listen for, or the one girl in front of us who we could kind of, sometimes I was like,
I know.
At certain parts, like looking over, and
Yeah.
she was definitely laughing at parts like that. I think she was around our age, so I think she got the humor of cellular phone.
What I would kill to see the first Scream again, like for the first time.
That was the first time we saw it on a big screen, though, at least for me.
I think I've seen it one other time on a big screen.
Okay.
But seeing it in an audience that like clearly loves it that much, and then also seeing new people who have never seen it was really cool. And I don't know, it's one of those films that no matter how many times I watch it, it's still good. It's even in my Letterboxd 4. That's how much I love this film. So with that, we are going to be tearing the films apart, but we really do love them. Like, we are super fans.
Yes, we wore shirts for the occasion. They're both mine. But sorry, that's Janae's shirt.
I borrowed the shirt, but that's okay. I need to get myself one. But
you do. You'll find one. I believe in you.
Yeah, I'll keep my eye open. But anyway, so we could start with the first one, and then we'll go from there. And the first one has the funniest mistakes for sure.
Yeah, I was trying to watch for them when we were watching the movie, but to be honest, I was just too wrapped up in watching the movie that I didn't really. And some of the stuff in the first one happens so fast. Like, I think the first one I remember, I'll have to look back at my notes quite a bit because this is a longer topic. But the first one I remember is when Sydney's dad, again, spoilers, at the end falls out of the closet because he decides to just do a little victory leap. Like, I'm still here, guys.
Yeah.
Because it's right after everything else happens. It's like, oh yeah, my dad's in the closet. Not that way. Well, who knows? You see...
Didn't they make that joke in Scary Movie, or am I wrong?
Oh, probably.
Pretty sure they made a joke about that in Scary Movie.
How could you not? They made a joke about how Sydney ran away from Billy.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, that's a good one. There's a lot of really good parodies on...
It doesn't hold up in general, but the Scream-specific references are very funny.
Yeah.
Anyway, so in the scene where her dad is being pushed out of the closet at the end... that's the thing. He's being pushed by a crew member, and you can see the arms of the person pushing him out of the closet. He's supposed to be just falling, or what I assume was just body checking the door to push it open. But
and I, like you said, when we watched it, I didn't notice that. I feel like you really do have to look for it. But it is funny once you see it there, it's like, oh, that's a full hand and no one's supposed to be in that closet with him.
Like, it is somewhat hidden by the rubble. So, like the rest of the stuff falling out, you can kind of give it a pass. Kind of like in the previous episode when we were talking about the guy wiping the lens.
Yeah.
And how it kind of looked like it was just debris of the space they were in. You can kind of chalk it up to that. I didn't notice that when we were watching it, and I knew it was there.
Yeah.
The one thing I did notice, and we could talk a bit more about specifically for the first movie anyway, is the ADR in some spots.
Yeah.
I noticed those.
Yeah. A lot of films from the 90s, I've been doing a huge binge watch of like 90s movies recently. ADR was used so frequently, just without, no one really cared. Like, they were just like, oh, whatever, no one's gonna notice, it's fine. Like, and they just full on change whole lines.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing specifically with the Scream movies, or at least the first one. I'll have to double check my notes again as we go to remember if there's anything specific in the other movies. But the first one, there's full like coverage shots of actors where they're just changing what is coming out of their mouth. And it doesn't sync up with what was originally there.
Yeah.
To bring up one specific example, give me a minute. I have to scroll back. This one I noticed while we were watching it. So Gail says, "Be right back" to Kenny, who's her cameraman, when she's leaving with Dewey. This is at the party in the end. You can see her mouth is motioning the original line, which is "keep watch," but they've re-recorded
to be right back.
Be right back.
Yeah, because that's a more iconic line in the movie, which you note here, like they were probably trying to bring that like a full circle thing, but then it sucks because I feel like sometimes these decisions are made. I mean, nowadays there's no such thing as picture lock, so open up something when it's already been delivered and you can change it. But I feel like they could have just changed the edit to make the line work or something, because if you're going to change a line like that you don't have reshoots for, it's just so obvious when you put it over top of the person talking.
Yeah, if you have a medium shot of someone and you're changing what they're saying, your lips aren't going to match at all, and it is very obvious. But yeah, I noted that I definitely think they changed the line because they wanted it to be, they brought up that third rule of, which for anyone who hasn't watched, the third rule is if you say, "I'll be right back," you're
not going to be right back.
Coming right back, and you will be killed. So I think the movie decided to change the line after the fact because they thought, we're going to change this. We're going to spin it on its head because Gail does live, spoiler, at the end, when you think that she gets killed. And when they say that's a rule and then it's broken is something that Scream loves to do. They love to break the rules of horror movie tropes and say, oh yeah, well, this is what every other film does, but we're going to change it. We're going to flip it on its head. So I definitely think they did that as a creative choice. But as you said, it could have been done in a way that was more hidden so that it's not obviously just her not saying the right line.
And I think the problem is the re-record of the line ends up being hidden because, to be totally honest with you, until I looked back at our notes and rewatched the movie recently, I didn't even realize that's what the new line record was. Like, it wasn't emphasized enough of a moment or a beat for me to realize, oh, they're putting that line back in for all the reasons you just said. It's like, oh, they're dubbing over a line that was already there. And then by the time I'm noticing it's not what she was saying, I don't even realize what they dubbed it over with.
Yeah.
So that didn't land for me. Like, that probably is what they were trying to do, but they probably could have just left it alone and it would have been fine because they didn't put as much of a beat on the line that they added in for it to be a good enough plant and payoff with her not dying later.
Yeah.
Which is something we also will get into about the grand span of the movies and how the plant and payoff sort of gets a little bit lazier after, like, basically the second movie, but more so in the, like, newer radio silence ones. There's not as satisfying as... It's hard when you have such a good first movie of a franchise, especially with the opening sequences. Because that was the whole thing that shocked and got people interested in Scream. And what spawned the sequels was they promoted that Drew Barrymore was in it, and then they killed her in the first 10 minutes of the movie. So you keep wondering what they're going to do and hope they can keep matching that energy. And Scream is still very iconic for their opening scenes. I still like most of them, although, again, with the third movie, it's not the best one. But they don't have satisfying planned payoffs for certain things they try and do later on in the series. And I think this was like an early indication of, like, sometimes you just don't need that extra one in there because it didn't do anything, at least for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an important line just because, like, I remember when I watched these films and, like, I was quoting them for, like, so long, like, the rules, saying that to all my friends. Like, don't you know the rules about horror movies? And it's so iconic to the point of, like, everybody knows it even if you don't know it. Even if, it's even quoted in other films now too. And it's like, that being the third rule was, like, such a thing. I think the issue is that they didn't, like, when you don't go in with that being the plan, like, for that to be her line, it is lost. And I think if they really made a point, then it would have been really good. Yeah. But yeah, it was just kind of, it wasn't done well and it was an afterthought, which is disappointing, even though, like, the rules are just so iconic that you've even in every film that follows of the Scream series, you're like looking for those and the rules that they're going to apply in those films. And so, yeah, I think it's like, it is important, but unfortunately they just didn't make it important.
Yeah, that one, because it was an afterthought, it didn't hit quite as well as the other one. And that wasn't really even like, well, it was the worst offender because it's the one I have kind of at the top of the audio examples one here. But I guess like just to go through a couple, because we're almost pretty much done talking about the first movie. So just to get on a couple of other audio. Sorry, Jack, we're ragging on audio here.
I don't care.
I guess in an early draft of the script, Sydney's boyfriend's last name was Forrest instead of Orth. So there's a scene where you can see...
was it... I thought it was Casey's boyfriend.
Sorry, yes,
Yeah.
Casey. Tatum telling Sydney that Casey's boyfriend, Forrest. I'm trying to paraphrase my notes, so I'm not
That's
just
okay,
reading them. But yeah, you're right. Casey's boyfriend.
Yeah,
Steve.
it was Casey's boyfriend had a different name, probably when they were writing the script. And then at some point it changed, whether it was after they shot or at some point, and maybe it got mixed up by the actress who played Tatum. But something was wrong there, and then they had to go and ADR that line to change the name.
Well, and I think... Again, to not get into too much about the third movie, but it definitely, by that film, and the whole reason why it's in a completely different episode to this one, is that I think they were starting to do, they could have done this before Scream, but I think they were giving different scripts out. So I think there were maybe, either it was a script draft revision or it was a different version of a script that had a different last name in it. Just because then that's an easy way of avoiding spoilers if things get leaked. But other than that, I think there was nothing too egregious. There's a couple, like there's a scene where Tatum's throwing beers at Ghostface and he's dry and then he's wet again.
I think that's a pretty big one.
That is that's probably the last
really
big
funny.
one. Yeah.
Well, just the fact that like, this costume, it is just like an all black cape thing, I guess. Cloak thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, like, you would think you'd be seeing things like blood. And then in that scene where she throws full on beers at him and then they break.
And then he's dry.
Yeah, he's like soaked. Like you can see in the one shot, he's completely soaked. And then suddenly next shot, he's dry. It's just so funny. But I think things like that, too, are also kind of what make Scream such a cult film because it is just, it's humorous.
Exactly. It takes itself serious enough that the serious moments still hit.
Oh, yeah.
But it's still a commentary on the horror genre that you can argue that, like, who cares that it's in there? It just kind of adds to
the
everything.
Cheese and the, it's comedic. And I find it hilarious. And I think, too, like, that costume, like...
It's iconic.
It's so funny because... It's a costume that, well, they say straight up that everybody has access to this costume. And then I think like the idea that it's one size fits all. So then when you find out that there's multiple killers, the idea that that costume, which is something we're going to talk about, the costume's going to end up being different sizes on different people, even though, it's just really funny how this costume, they did play on that a lot. And just the disbelief that you have with this Halloween costume.
One thing, I guess, one last thing, because I also want to make sure we can get through each of the movies while we're recording. Because we've established we both love Scream, but I watched a video on YouTube like last year, I think, of a guy who actually like picked apart each movie and tried to theorize which Ghostface was doing what thing at which time, like through 1 through 6. And number 1 is the one that had the best track record of, if you do watch it with that in mind, you kind of can pick out, okay, that was probably Stu, that was probably Billy, and while Billy was doing this was Stu. Like when
a lot of thought went into it.
Yeah, you don't get it as much in the sequels.
No.
But the first one, you can tell they planned even that to a T of like, okay, if this person's over here, that means this person has to be doing this thing over here. When Billy comes in the window, Stu's off getting Sydney's dad, and that's how he ends up at Stu's house later because he was taking care of that. While Billy could seem innocent because then it didn't look like anything else was going on, all this stuff. And you think about it with that much depth if you have that amount of time and you're like, wow, that's crazy, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
And they did it so that if someone, I guess, ever did that, it would make sense. But then when you get to the later movies, you're kind of like, okay, so I guess he's a bit like Michael Myers, a little superhuman now, because I guess he went 6 blocks in 2 minutes, even though there was another person.
Yeah.
It gets a little bit loose, but the first one's pretty rock solid.
The first one's good because it, like, you know, even I think what helped too is that the 2 killers are relatively similar in height. I think Stu's supposed to be, he's taller technically, but they do try and make it through the movie seem like they're relatively close in height so that when it's revealed that there's 2 of them, you're never kind of like, oh, like there's such a difference between these 2.
The one thing visually they do to distinguish them, though, is they have different ways of stabbing people. So if there's a kill on screen, I forget which one's which, because I don't think I put it in my notes either. One of them stabs like this, and one of them stabs like this.
Yeah.
So they did that as well, that, like, again, it makes it easier to track that if you are, again, looking back through it, trying to pick out who's who, that's the only visual tell, because otherwise, the same height, same build, same everything else. I guess the only other little thing, you can't really tell, again, who's who, but in the first movie especially, when they're getting, like, you know, beer thrown at them and, like, shit knocked at them, you hear the actors go, ugh!
Yeah. So you do hear Stu's voice at one point. I remember looking into that, and it was like nobody would know. And I mean, even I did notice when we did our rewatch last week that the voice on the telephone, like when they do that funny warped voice, it does sound a lot like my brain.
Roger L. Jackson? Because it is a guy doing the voice of Ghostface.
Yeah, no,
the whole time.
I know. I mean, I think it sounds a lot like Skeet Ulrich, like Billy. I think it sounds...
I think he probably worked with them to get a cadence down for when it was supposed to be which person on the phone.
Yeah. I remember, like, when we were watching, like, it does sound in some moments, it's kind of near the end, it sounds like it could be him. But it is funny that it is a totally different person who did the voice. But
it would be interesting to know from a sound perspective if they did go in and try, for at least the opening scene with Casey, if they tried to go in and do like a mix of Roger and Skeet or something. So because then you weren't introduced to the character yet. So because it would be both voices blended, you wouldn't necessarily know that some of it would be peeking through. But even when he uses the voice changer later, you hear both voices. So they've mixed it together at that point. So it does kind of make you wonder if they did that in the opening scene.
Yeah, I'm
would
curious because there were moments where it sounded very close, and my thought was, oh wow, like I'm surprised you don't clue into that when you watch it. You assume that it's doing this weird voice thing, and so you're not putting, for the very first time when I watched it a long time ago, you're not like immediately thinking that, like, oh, it would be that obvious. But yeah, I did notice that there was slight similarities after, and you're like, yeah, how did they not know? How did they not know?
Obviously, it's Billy. He had the cellular phone.
The cellular phone. Yeah, it's too good. I also saw there was a clip, too, where the stunt double in the Ghostface costume for Stu, it's supposed to be Stu at that moment, they do like a flip over
Yeah, over the couch.
Over Sydney, is it over the couch or over Sydney?
They go over the couch together,
during the fight sequence with her. And you do see a bit of the body double. It's clearly not Stu.
We have a whole other episode about body doubles today.
Sorry. Well, we'll get there.
Yeah, we'll tack it onto that one now that I know you realized it. Because this is why there's endless things to talk about. Mm-hmm. You're constantly, even with movie you've seen a million times, you could still notice new stuff. Mm-hmm. So Scream 2, I'm going to start off with an example real quick before I get into more of it, because I noticed it with my partner in real time last time we watched it. There's a scene where a character... I guess it doesn't matter if I spoil things. We already said they're going to be spoilers. Sarah Michelle Gellar plays one of Sydney's college sisters. I won't say friends. I don't really even know if they're friends. They're in the same fraternity, I think, or they go to the same college. And not fraternity. What's the other one? That's sorority. For guys. What?
Sorority.
Thank you. There's a scene in the movie where Ghostface is pushing Sarah Michelle Gellar's character off of a balcony on the college campus, and you can see the crew guy in a tree or something. I mean, it's clearly a set, so she's not as far off the ground as she's meant to appear to be. Mm-hmm. But the guy's waiting in the corner of the camera, probably holding a mat or something. You can fully see him.
Yeah.
I remember when I noticed that. I think we were watching it. We have it on VHS, so I can't remember if we were watching on there or on a streaming service, but we went back a few times. I was like, there's a guy. Mm-hmm. There's a guy there. He saw the whole thing.
Yeah, it's one of the most talked about things in the Scream franchise for a mistake, a movie mistake.
Yeah.
And it's funny too because it is very obvious.
It's so funny.
And they could go back and fix that later on, but they never did. At this point, I think it's they're going with the joke. It's just too funny.
Again,
this guy's just standing there watching.
If there's any franchise that's going to keep in stuff like this and it still kind of works and doesn't totally take you out of it, it's going to be Scream. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to start off with that example for the first movie because when we talked about Wednesday in a previous episode and we noticed things real time watching it, I just so vividly remember it was part of the inspiration for this whole podcast. I was like, people need to know about this. It's hilarious. I've seen this movie so many times. And then it took the one time for me to be like, there's a guy there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've gone back and watched it too and have wondered how that got through. And I had one thought. I don't know if it's accurate, but do you think it could be due to certain framing that they had it planned for, maybe 4x3 framing or something for the movies, and then
think so.
Ended up going full screen, and then
I'll have to check if the VHS I have is widescreen or full screen.
Yes.
Because I don't remember. But you could be right, because I think we talked about that a little bit in one of our previous episodes, and we will be talking again later in the episode about body doubles, where specifically it shows Friends, where they thought they were cropping out body doubles, but they weren't.
Yeah, they did not anticipate that later they would have to change it to full screen for new TVs. Everybody gets the wide TV, and they did not know that they would have to worry about that. Yes. But I can't remember with this one if that was the issue, because I know he is bottom right of screen, right?
Well, I think
so I'm could he have been cropped out
right
at one point?
Bottom middle? I feel if you cropped it out,
kind of is in the middle, isn't he?
You'd miss some of the action. So it must have just been this is the best take we got. Hopefully no one notices.
Yeah, maybe with the stunt double, they only had so many to go with.
Well, she only has time to jump off the roof once, so chuck her over. That's lunch.
Yeah, we're good.
We got it.
Kind of balding man at the bottom. It's all good.
Yeah.
He's just part of the
We don't have to hair shame him. It's fine that he's bald.
It was just an observation.
Sure.
Yeah, that one's a very notable one. It's pretty funny. I've actually done screenings of that with people, and it's purposely okay, let's look for it. It's coming up. Let's see.
Yeah, exactly.
Too classic.
They sort of joked about it in the first movie, if they make a movie about this, I wonder who's going to play you, Sid, or something. And she's like, with my luck, it'll be Tori Spelling. Mm-hmm. And later, I forget which movie, it might have even been this one. There's a clip of Tori Spelling playing Sydney in one of the Stab movies, and that's sort of when we're introduced to that little joke in the first one spawned an actual movie series within the movie series of the Scream stories, but it's called Stab.
Yeah. Well, the second one is where it starts to get really like meta in the sense that, you know,
it opens with a screening of Stab.
Yeah, it's with a screening and like with the rules of the first movie about what's in a horror movie. Then we literally turn the first movie into a horror movie. And it's just, you know, it's the perfect like metaverse of
the Zuck's coming for us.
it's so fun, and it's fun to follow, but they definitely got a lot of the details wrong.
Yeah, and they kind of continue to after the second one as well. Like, again, that kind of becomes a running thing where, like, you know, they can't even keep Stab straight. They change by the third movie. He was even playing Sydney. It's not Tori Spelling anymore. So, yeah, it must have been the second one where they had her. In that clip. According to the Scream Wikipedia, so I'd just like to point out, we did a lot of research for this. The super in-depth stuff, I'm going to say where it came from because I want to cite sources, but also I didn't do that deep of a deep dive. Somebody else did a lot of the work for us, and we're just quoting it. So per the Scream Wikipedia, that somebody else has a lot of time to fill out. The second Scream film's cold opening in the theater, Stab shows the date of April 12th, 97, but then the actual date is inconsistent with when the story of the first movie lined up, so that's already kind of a bit of a discrepancy. You can argue maybe they changed it for in-story legal reasons, but I guess, like, later on, it's very obvious that it's supposed to be 96 instead of 97. And then they continue to go on to describe that in the film's dialogue, Maureen Evans overhears another moviegoer state, the kids got killed in California a couple of years ago, and then Gail acknowledges the time passing of several years between Cotton and Sydney. So the kind of like, by like, you know, nitpicking, changed some of the timeline a little bit. Probably just because they thought no one would notice. I don't know. It's super nitpicky. There's like bigger continuity things that we're going to point out about later films, especially, like I said, where Stab's concerned. But
yeah,
that's like if you're really getting into the fine tooth, like, actually, it was 4 months ago, not 5. Which is why I point out that somebody else dug into that whole thing.
Well, it is interesting because they do show a lot of close-ups of like who are the actors in the movie? When did the movie come out? And, you know, they're very purposely like pointing and putting on a big screen like these details. So yeah, there's going to be people out there who are definitely going to go, I'm going to look into that.
Yeah.
And
it just takes one person and then you're like, okay. Yeah, that doesn't make sense. But again, they probably didn't think anyone was going to be picking it apart that much.
It's not something I would have noticed on a watch of the film. Randy, because he is the film nerd, as we were just talking about, there are certain people who go and look into movies and know all the details about them. Randy is that person, and he is teaching like a film studies class.
No, he's not teaching. He's just in the class.
Oh, right. I'm thinking of later.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So he is in the class. So they're in like a college.
Like a college film class.
Yeah, college film class. He is essentially talking about horror films. Like, he's very, very obsessed with them, and he has all the rules. He knows everything. Basically, he is just talking about the Alien movies, and someone in the class quotes the film saying, "Get away from her, you bitch." And then Randy corrects them because he is a smartass. And he says, I think the correct line is, "Stay away from her, you bitch." But
get away from her, you bitch. I believe the line is "stay away from her, you bitch." It's film class, right?
The person he corrected is right.
Apparently, he was the wrong one.
Apparently.
Get away from her, you bitch!
But here's the thing. I wouldn't have known that either.
No.
I don't know the Alien films.
Look, I'm rewatching the first one for the first time in years this week. I haven't yet before this recording, so I wouldn't know either. But to me, it's just hilarious that they set Randy up to be this, like, he is the guy sort of navigating the audience and the characters through the tropes of what the horror movies are. And he works at a movie store. He knows movies inside and out. And he incorrectly corrects somebody on a really famous movie line.
Yeah. I wonder if they meant to do, like, if they meant to mess that up.
That's
that
why
he's
he
just
died.
supposed to be such a know-it-all.
He died because he got a
Because he got a quote wrong. Well, I would like to touch on that subject a little more later.
Uh-oh.
Oh, there's, I don't know. I guess we could just talk about it now.
Sure.
Well, going back to the first movie, one of my biggest gripes about the very opening when Casey Becker's on the phone with Ghostface, and he is asking her a series of questions about horror movies that she has to answer for her boyfriend and her to live. Well, the one he asks her about, he literally says, this is quote unquote, okay, who was the killer in Friday the 13th?
Name the killer in Friday the 13th.
Jason! Jason! Jason!
I'm sorry. That's the wrong answer.
He doesn't say the first film. He just says Friday the 13th,
Look.
which is a franchise.
Look. Ghostface is and is not all about semantics. You can completely argue he said it that way, knowing she was going to get it wrong. Because the question he says after that is literally, which door am I at? And once you've seen the movie, you know there's two people. He knows she's going to get that wrong no matter what she says. So even if that one didn't trip her up, that one would, because he'd be like, I'm at your front door, even though it doesn't matter.
I just feel like there are so many instances where he is so specific on horror movies.
Yeah.
And then, you know, even the scene where he says, like, oh, Norman Bates didn't have a motive. Well, technically,
Oedipus
he
complex
did,
was a
and
bit of a moment.
Yeah. He literally just had a lot of
Mommy issues.
mommy issues. So, I mean, you know, he got a lot of things wrong when it came to horror movies. And I just thought that was really funny.
That's how you know it's not Randy. Until the second movie.
Until Randy gets that quote wrong. So,
And then
I
he
guess
dies.
You can, apparently, unless you're absolutely perfect with the quotes, then.
That should be a running thing. Not that I think any of the filmmakers are going to pick this up for the later installments. Well, actually, the seventh one is coming out, was it February of 2026? So kind of soon. But it would be funny if that becomes another running thing where the second someone gets some kind of movie trivia wrong, whether it's a phone question or just something in general, means they're going to die. Because Billy does die, well, so does Stu. And they were the ones who asked a wrong question, or potentially on purpose. And then Randy dies after getting a quote wrong.
Well, maybe it's all tied to being very, very, very specific about your questions and your answers for horror movies.
You know something that's also very, very, very specific and very, very, very wrong. And the only thing we will be talking about in regards to the third movie in this entire episode is Courtney Cox's bangs. Why? Why? There's no production mistake. There's no post mistake. There's no continuity. They're bad the whole way through. You just can't not talk about it. It has nothing to do with where we're putting the third movie, and it can't not be discussed. So that is the only thing we're going to touch on here, which qualifies it for the overall franchise ranking at the end of this episode.
Well, you know what? I wish she had those bangs in every single film because they
How
were
dare you.
amazing.
No.
They were so talked about. It was...
But not in a good way.
Hey, bad publicity can also be good publicity,
Look,
all right?
Something needs to be good about the third movie, and that didn't help.
Hey, you know what? I liked the third, but I think I liked it for its cheesiness.
Yeah,
for
that
its
helps the cheese.
Cultness. It is a bad film. It is a That is not to be denied, but it's bad in such a good way. I still love it. I still quite enjoy watching it.
I think it's still a franchise where it doesn't really have any egregiously horrible movies. Like, we are going to dunk on the third one, and our whole point of this podcast is to poke holes in things that we like to watch and things that we don't like to watch. But it, for all intents and purposes, for being 6 movies and coming up to be 7, it's pretty consistent. Like, it could have been worse. It's not like it had one particular movie that was like 5% on Rotten Tomatoes and everyone tries to forget about it. Like, it's not Halloween where we all try and forget the third one happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think all franchises are going to have that one that kind of fell off.
But even with this one, it's like, I don't love the third one. I'll still rewatch it, though.
Yeah, it still like plays into the universe that they've made, and it still has a lot of really great quotes, and it's I still find it super
Patrick
fun.
Warburton's in it.
Yeah.
Carrie Fisher's in it.
Yeah, it's
Jay and
just,
Silent Bob are in it.
I mean, honestly, like the whole like making movies off of this thing that happened in their town. It's just, they had to go there. It was funny. They did it. It could have we'll
talk about why it could have been better. Stay tuned for a completely different episode. Yeah. But
for the later rankings, I have to say this is all why I still like the film.
Fine. On to the 4th movie.
Now we're on the 4th.
Because we're done now.
Oh, you're cutting me off.
I am.
Not allowed to talk about how I love Courtney Cox's bangs.
You said that. You said it enough. Hey. It's a horrible haircut.
You know, I'm sure it'll come back. All things come back. You're going to start seeing kids with the little...
You kind of already are.
Wispy. Yeah. Well, I mean, the new Beetlejuice came out, and...
Oh, true.
There was a time people were doing the weird Lydia bangs, so maybe they'll...
My hair was just naturally like that in high school because it was super oily. So when I had bangs, they kind of just did that anyway. And I was like, yeah, I just like Beetlejuice a lot.
Yeah, it's a good cover.
For the 4th movie, like I said, skipping over the 3rd one, there's not a lot. It's pretty nitpicky. It's not one of my favorite Scream movies. It's also, I feel like with the 3rd one, it could have been a pretty solid trilogy, and then for some reason they decided to make a 4th one. Which again, with Scream, it like plays into the tropes of like, we're gonna make another one just because like every franchise makes a remake or does another movie years later for whatever reason. I will say, and this is more of just a critique, less so than a mistake. I hate the cinematography in this movie.
It was very different.
It's so Half-Blood Prince, and I didn't like the cinematography in that movie either. It's not the same cinematographer.
Yeah, no.
But
I think so. So I do like this one, but I think the main reason I liked it was because we were like deprived of Scream movies for so long. Mm-hmm. It was like the first 3 happened, and then a long time goes, and you think, okay, Scream's done. And then they were coming back out with another movie. So the excitement was off the charts. I went to the theater to see it.
Me too.
I was so excited. I'm like, I didn't think they would go back into this franchise again. And
the opening was a bit much.
It was crazy.
Like 8 openings.
Yeah. But I think that's the thing is they were like, okay, what are we going to do? Like, how are we going to up the ante on this? And so I think little pre-film school me was like, oh, like, what are they going to do for something that's so, like, has a specific universe and has all these fun ideas? And so it was like, okay, yeah, they definitely went over the top. But I did enjoy it for the things it was saying, I think.
Yeah, I like it more on repeat viewings. I have friggin' Facebook and the like, on this day, how many ever years ago, at some point when I was young and on Facebook, I made a status saying, Scream 4 is the worst movie I've ever seen. What was that opening? Or something along those lines.
Oh my God.
Like, I was mad enough about it to make an angsty Facebook status.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And then I rewatch it now. I'm like, okay, it was bad, but it wasn't that bad. I didn't appreciate the camp and the commentary of the first three. I think I'd only seen the first one at that point, maybe the second one.
Okay.
And I wasn't as big of a fan because I was still getting into horror, and I was like, I didn't understand like commentary horror versus like, well, that wasn't scary. So I'm trying to find like my niche still. But yeah, this was the first one I saw in the theater, and I just remember making that status after being so like, this movie sucked.
Yeah, I remember when I'd make Facebook statuses saying, I hate math. Why
Or
do
I
have
hate
to
this
do
person.
math?
You know who you are.
Yeah, that was probably the same time period.
Oh, definitely.
So maybe it was just a thought. in
We
the
were just
moment.
young and dumb in 2011.
Yeah.
You know, what did we know?
I will say, I remember coming away from the theater like being really, really amazed. I was just like, I couldn't believe that they could bring back this world, and they did, and I was so excited. But I do agree, it looked so different because it was just like you go from so long, and now we're in the like late,
We're in the 2010s.
Yeah, later
Yeah.
2000s, 2010s, and it's like filmmaking is so different now, and like coloring is so different now. Like,
But
you know,
it's
it's
not
that
like-
bluey kind of.
It's not like it looked like other movies that were coming out at the time either. Like, it looked
guess,
distinct for
yeah.
a Scream movie, but it also looked distinct for other, like, it had that weird glossy.
But it was pretty moody looking. Like it had
coloring was
moody
fine. It was
vibes.
the like Vaseline screen on the footage that I didn't like.
Yeah. Yeah. It was very different. And it was like, you know, to go from the first three movies that look very filmy too. You know, you have that film grain and the very distinct kind of older look that just
Yeah.
gave those first three movies like,
Especially watching them
it's
again
just
now
so
on
good.
VHS. Like, they don't have
Yeah.
the fourth one or the fifth or sixth on VHS. So it's still, you can maintain that like nostalgic quality by watching them that way.
It's so good. And it definitely took away from that when you hit that fourth movie. But I think it was, you know, it's trying to be a new thing and trying to bring back that world. And then these kind of next couple films that come after it definitely, they try even more to like hone what the new look is.
Yeah. I do think, coming back to the thing I said about the videos I watched of who was which Ghostface and what scenes or movies, I'm pretty sure Charlie did most of the murders, which he's more of the Ghostface stature than Jill.
Yeah.
But for anyone that may have been her, she's tiny.
Yeah.
So this is the first one where a body double being Ghostface instead of the actual actor, like, is a huge misdirect that doesn't quite fit with the actual outcome of the story.
This is where the disbelief starts to come in. And
with the fourth one, I think.
Yeah, you really have to, you know, the first couple movies, as you said, they're relatively,
Even Mrs.
same-ish
Loomis is like
yeah,
not short.
yeah. So it's like you can believe, okay, there's two and they're similar in height, so you wouldn't be able to distinguish them, and then you get to a point where you're kind of like, how do we believe that person suddenly they're like, oh, why is this person
Yeah.
actually shorter than I
This is when we get into a little bit of the, I guess Ghostface is superhuman, even though he's just a person and usually a relative of Sydney's.
Yeah, or he
Like-
just wears like platform boots or
Yeah,
something.
like I guess you could argue, but then like, sure.
Yeah, it gets to the point where you do kind of go. The best part about the first couple movies anyway was when you find out who the killers are. It all kind of goes, it all makes sense,
Yeah.
and it's so good. And then I do find what you're saying, that this film you kind of go, oh, really,
Really?
like. It's hard for me to believe that I had to follow this movie and that they were doing the killing this whole time.
Yeah, I think I choose to believe it was mostly Charlie because it makes the most sense with the Ghostface stature. But because I think they also tried to argue, and by they I mean the YouTube video that I watched, they kind of were trying to give reason to why it was mainly Charlie. Was because Jill was so focused on just Sydney and using Charlie as kind of just like a lapdog assistant kind of thing. She'd be like, okay, you go do the killings. I'm dealing with the logics and everything. Like, I don't want blood on my hands. You do it.
Right.
Which I think can kind of, if that was the case, give some lenience to the stature. But I have a hard time believing Chill didn't do any of it because there's still two of them. So I think, that's the start of the like, I don't know if the stature of Ghostface is really an indicator anymore.
Yeah, that's where it starts to kind of happen. And you start to notice that a lot more. And I do think that was probably the first movie I actually really started to look out for things like that.
Yeah, because you know the drill at that point, and except for the third one, you're like, okay, well, there's probably two of them. But maybe they were riffing on the third one going, well, maybe now people aren't going to expect that there's two. Otherwise, other than the like stature stuff, it's mostly just little things about this movie. I'm looking over notes again. Little things a lot about the technology. I have two things here about iPhones. Kirby's on a phone with Jill, and as she approaches the Stab Fest party, her iPhone is on the contacts list and not in call mode.
Not in call, yeah.
And a scene where Robbie is at the front door of Kirby's house just before he's stabbed. He's watching a video on his droid, but the player controls that are on the screen are from an iOS phone. So like little technology discrepancies, which makes sense because this was also the first like more modern when everyone has a cellular phone.
Now they're bringing in the idea of, now it's harder to track and there's cell phones everywhere as there are now. And so they really had to like with this newer film, like after the first three, much later, had to deal with all these new ideas of technology.
Do you know the Apple rule in movies?
No.
If somebody's using an Apple product, they can't be a villain. Because Apple doesn't want that kind of negative association with their products. So if you watch...
Wait, is that real?
Yeah. If you watch closely in any movie, if they're using an Apple product, they're not a bad guy. They'll either be using not an Apple brand or like a made-up brand.
Oh my gosh, they're paying lots of money to get that?
Yeah, I think they pay more for their products being used in a movie if it's going to be not negatively associated with their project.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that. Is that still a thing?
I think so. Yeah.
What?
Which is why, like, I wonder...
I will say nowadays in films, you don't normally... They do make it not appear as obvious what brand of phone it is. I've noticed that recently in films.
Like, It Follows has that cool shell phone that's, like, not time period specific.
Yeah. They're definitely trying to make it so it's not so... You're not so focused on the, like, branding of something as much.
Exactly.
Unless they specifically had a brand deal. Like,
that's what I mean. If they
there are some films that have that for sure.
If they pay more for the Apple product, it'll be on characters that don't have negative intent. I would say, though, and you can argue it's an ambiguous thing, or was because it was such a strong part of the story, I guess you could poke at that theory with regards to Baby Reindeer. But I don't think she was ever actually using an Apple product. I think that was part of why it was so funny her emails ended with that, because she was clearly typing the iPhone thing at the end of the email.
Yeah, because it would be misspelled. iPhone was misspelled.
Yeah. But anyway, that's a tangent. A tangent. That was a tangent.
I know. It's relevant. They just won a bunch of Emmys. So.
Yeah, true.
Great
but
show.
It's also all of the characters in that are morally ambiguous. So you can't. Martha wasn't a great person, but she's far from the only villain of that series.
Yeah.
But I also don't think she was actually using any Apple products. So
yeah. Very sidebarring now.
It's okay. We're still talking about Scream. So
in the final shot of that when her head
I was just looking at that note.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I never saw that. So basically at the end, Jill's head still is moving or moves slightly. And they were just leaving it in there as kind of an ambiguous, she
could come back.
She could come back later down the line. But this is one of the last Wes Craven.
It is the last. Well, it's the last Wes Craven Scream.
Yeah. And so his idea was, okay, well, leave it in because maybe I want to bring her back. Then
Maybe
he's
she'll come
not.
back in the 7th, because Kevin
They wanted
Williamson.
to honor him. They could do that.
Well, Kevin Williamson's directing the 7th one, I'm pretty sure, and he's the writer of the original movies, so it's possible he could very much draw from original drafts and ideas of like the first few and bring those back.
Yeah, I mean, that was really cool when I read through and that you had put that in there. I was like, wait, that really happened? I went back and watched and I was like, oh, yeah, it is very... You're like, okay, could she still be alive? And then the whole idea is, in the Scream franchise of make sure they're dead because they could come back.
Well, that's also the whole argument with Stu. Mm-hmm. Because if you really want to pull string together with Jill and Stu, they were both electrocuted. Didn't go back to check if Stu was dead. And Jill's ambiguous. So you could argue they're setting it up that, especially when it's not like a gunshot or a stab that hits like an artery or something, it's like... I mean, if it's like a garage door like Tatum, she's pretty fucking dead. But if it's like electricity, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that they would leave that in there on purpose to leave it open-ended.
I'm curious.
Just to people who would really pay attention, really. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, we've had 3 movies since. 2 movies since, and another one's being made now. Mm-hmm. So they could still go back on that.
That's what I mean. They could bring back Jill. They could bring back Stu.
They brought back a character that we thought had died. You're led to believe, anyway, that Kirby dies.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah. I was like, what is her name?
I'm so stupid.
No, I was blanking on her name. So, like, you're led to believe that she dies, and then she later comes back in one of the recent films. So it's not the first time they've done this,
That's true.
A sudden return of a character you thought was dead.
I completely forgot about Kirby. Even though we were just talking about the 4th movie.
That's okay. So, yeah, it's like, it's a possibility that they could do that. And then you wonder, is it a production mistake that she was, they had the actress in there and she just moved her head and they thought, well, we'll just go with it and people will have fun with that idea. Or did they not realize?
She got electrocuted. There could be some residual, like, body muscle spasms, stuff like that.
I guess
that's why it's ambiguous, right?
Yeah. That's true.
But yeah, it was probably not super intentional, and then Wes Craven was probably like, yeah, sure. Who knows?
Yeah.
I'll be dead. No, he didn't know he was going to be dead.
R.I.P. Wes Craven.
All right. So if you can't tell, myself and Janae are big Scream fans, and because of that, we are going to be cutting this discussion into 2 parts. You've just listened to part 1, which is the Wes Craven era, including films 1, 2, and 4, and a little bit about 3. But you can stay tuned for the rest of our discussion about radio silence, marketing, and the ranking system of all the films and the offenses that we've talked about in both parts. Quality Control Chicks podcast is produced and co-hosted by Lisa Cumming and Janae Perez. Audio record, mix, and master by Jack Rudy. For clips, updates, and more, you can follow our Instagram at Quality Control Chicks Pod. You can also find us on Spotify or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.